Dear students, today we will be discussing the play Death and the King's Horseman, written by Wole Soyinka. So before going into the thorough discussion, let us have a look at the lecture outline. What will we be covering in today's lecture? We will be having 7 sections in today's lecture. First section is about a brief introduction of Wole Soyinka as a writer, as a person. Second section deals with a brief overview of the play. In third section, we shall discuss some of the important characters of the play. In the next section, section 4, we will discuss 3 important themes regarding this play, and they are the theme of the life cycle, culture clash, and duty and responsibility. In section 5, we will be having a look at the style of the writer in this particular play, and we will be looking at the setting, tragic pattern, foreshadowing, and ritual. How has the writer used these things to form his own style? In next section, section number 6, we will be discussing the historical context, and since we are going to discuss the country Nigeria, as the play is set in the country of Nigeria, and it is set against the background of the problems, disturbances in Nigeria at that time. And in the last section, 7th section, we will be having a look at some of the important questions regarding this play. So before going into further details of the play, let us have a look at this famous saying by the writer Wole Soyinka: "A tiger does not shout its tigritude, it acts." This statement, this quotation, this saying tells all about the viewpoint of Wole Soyinka. How does he perceive things and reality around him? So moving towards the section 1, we are going to discuss Wole Soyinka, a brief introduction of Wole Soyinka as a writer. His full name is Akinwande Wole Soyinka. He is a Nigerian playwright, poet, and essayist in English language, professor of creative writing at the University of Nevada, a scholar in residence at NYU's Institute of African American Affairs, and at Loyola's Marymount University in Los Angeles, California, United States. He has also taught at the universities of Oxford, Harvard, and Yale, and has been a distinguished scholar in residence at Duke University. And in almost all these universities, the major subject he has been dealing with in teaching has been comparative literature. He was born on July 13, 1934 in Ejibo, Isara, near Ikeketa in western Nigeria, which was at the time a colony of Great Britain. When the writer Wole Soyinka wrote this play, Death and the King's Horseman, at that time his native country, Nigeria, was in the control of the British. It had been a colony of the British at that time when he wrote this play. So, since it was a colony of British, he happened to come across the influences of both the Yoruban and Western cultures. His parents were Christians, but his other relatives observed African beliefs and deities. At the age of 20, he went to the University of Leeds in England to pursue his interest in drama, and at that time, the University of Leeds was offering very good studies in drama. So he went there for his studies, and after graduation from the University of Leeds, he joined London's Royal Court Theatre as a script reader and then as a writer. And due to his meritorious services, he has won several distinctions. For example, in 1986, he won the Nobel Prize for Literature as the first African writer. Then he won Benson Medal from Royal Society of Literature in 1990. Then again he had Academy of Achievement Golden Plate Award in 2009. Again, Ensfield Wolf Book Award Lifetime Achievement in 2012, and in December 2017 he was awarded the Europe Theatre Prize in Special Prize category, and this special prize category alludes to his services regarding cultural transformations and cultural exchanges between Africa and several other parts of the world. So Wole Soyinka gained prominence as an author, as a producer, director, and a performer. And he has been an intellectual and a political activist who always spoke and wrote against the government corruption. He always alluded to and pointed out very vehemently the corrupt government practices that were prevalent in Nigeria. And he always criticized the government for its corrupt actions. And due to these activities, due to his political activism, he has been twice sent to the solitary confinement in cell. In 1965, he was arrested for criticizing the government over the radio, but he was acquitted. He was again arrested in 1967 for criticizing the government in print, and then again he was held a prisoner without charges for more than 2 years, almost around for 15 months, and in those 15 months he gained his political acumen, his political insight, and that political insight helped him gain maturity as a writer. Since he had very closely observed the British as the colonial powers, but after witnessing corruption in his native land, native country by their national African leaders, he switched his attention towards the corruption of the leaders of his country. He wrote more than a dozen plays, poetry, novels, essays in criticism, and also an autobiography. He created his plays incorporating traditional Yoruban dance, music, and proverbs with political messages about the need for Nigerians to break free from the influences of Western culture. All his plays were tinged with the message of political awareness for the Nigerians so that they can get rid of the influences of the colonial powers. His first play was The Swamp Dwellers, which he wrote in 1959, and just 1 year after the publishing of his first play, Nigeria got independence in 1960. His other very well-known plays include The Lion and the Jewel, he wrote in 1962, A Dance of the Forest, he wrote in 1963, then Madmen and Specialists, 1971, The Strong Breed, 1963, and Death and the King's Horseman in 1975, and several other plays he wrote. which earned him a lot of prominence. Okay, now we have section 2, in which we will have a brief overview of the play Death and the King's Horseman. So the play is enacted in 5 total acts, where in Act 1 the writer narrates the exposition of the play, and in the first act we are introduced to the major characters of the play. And the first act is in the market scene, and in the very first act the very important story is of the not-eye bird. That is a bird that fails to fulfill its duty, and the story of this bird is very very prominent, and that is very very important regarding the overall concept of the play. And in Act 1 we are told that it is the last day of the king's chief horseman, whose name was Elesin Oba, and it was the last day on this earth, and he has been rejoicing his last day, because the next day he is going to die as per the ritual of the Africans. In Act 2, we are taken to the home of Simon Pickings, who is a British officer, and he has stationed there with his wife Jane Pickings, and his work is to just carry out the orders of the prince from the England. And in Act 2 we also have the discussion between Amusa and Simon about Egungun. We know that Amusa had been once an African, but now he is converted into Christian, and there is a very brief discussion between Amusa and Simon about Egungun, and Egungun we know that is the very sacred dress of the Africans that they wear at death of someone. So when there is a very very hot exchange of words between Amusa and Simon, but even then Simon orders Amusa to arrest Elesin Oba, since he comes to know that he is going to commit the ritual death for the dead king. And actually Simon doesn't want it to happen, since he knows that Mr. Prince from England is going to pay a visit to the colony in Nigeria or Africa, so he does not want his trip to be somewhat made dull or problematic by such committing of death by Oba. In Act 3 we see that before dying, before going on the journey of death, Elesin Oba wishes to marry a beautiful damsel, a beautiful girl that he happened to see in the market, and since he comes to know that that girl is actually going to be the daughter-in-law of HIbah, who is the mother of the market, who is the wise woman of the market, but she asks his wish to be granted, since they revere and they respect the people who are going to the next world, because they are going to establish the connection between the dead and the living. So therefore she grants his wish, and in third act we see that there is Alison's wedding scene, and along with that there is the preparation for his death too, and we can see the drums are beating in the background, and they give a message that some sort of death is going to be committed, and the king's dogs and horse have already died. So in Act 3 we see the two both happy and sad scenes are being committed at the same time. In Act 4, we see that there is the ballroom where the festivity and party is going on, and then we also witness an encounter between Olunde and Oba, Olunde is actually, we know, the son of Elesin Oba, and he went to England to pursue his career in medicine. And when he sees Elesin Oba, he reprimands him for not carrying out the manly duty, for not carrying out the ritual death, and for delaying it, etc., etc. So there is a hard exchange of words between the horseman and his son. In Act 5, we see the final scene of the play, and we see Elesin Oba in the prison cell, and we see the mother of the market woman, Ilocha, and she also reprimands Oba for not carrying out his own ritual death. And Olunde is very, very unhappy and sad at his father for not carrying out the duty, and he holds himself responsible for carrying out the duty, and that is why he just kills himself in place of his father. And Elesin Oba, who cannot also see this miserable plight and condition, and who is very much upset and disturbed, he also stifles himself and commits suicide. So till now, this was the overall story of the play. Now moving towards section 3, we are going to discuss some of the very important characters of the play. So first character we have here is Amusa, and he's been a sergeant in Native Administration Police. He had been a black African who was working for the white superior people, British colonists, and he is neither trusted by the Britishers because they think he is African and he has no honesty and he has no intelligence, and along with them he is also not trusted by their native Africans because he converted himself into Christian, so the Africans also don't trust him. The next character that is an important character is the bride, and throughout the play the bride remains silent, but she really enacts some of the very, very important roles in the play. She is engaged to basically Aloja's son, and Elesin Oba, when he sees her, is just mesmerized by her beauty, and he does not even ask her consent for marriage, and he marries her. And in the last scene, she closes Elesin Oba's eyes after he is dead. The next very important character in the play is of Ilocha, and she is known as the mother of the market. She is considered to be very much wise, and she is very much skilled in all the African proverbs. She can talk to anyone and she can understand all their proverbs, and she can respond accordingly. Then we have the protagonist of the play, who is Elesin Oba, and he is the king's chief horseman around whom the whole story is woven. And we are told that he is a man of enormous vitality, and he enjoyed all his life with the king. He enjoyed all sorts of foods, all sorts of clothes, all sorts of visits, etc., etc. And since the king is dead, so he considers himself loyal and sincere enough that he would carry out the ritual suicide that is meant to be carried out if the king is dead. Then the two important characters there are Mr. Simon and Jane Pickings, and they represent the British stationed in Africa. And other character is Olohio, and he is the praise singer, and he accompanies Elesin on major journeys in major scenes, and he is seen to be singing and chanting. He is very much devoted to Elesin, and he happens to see into the darkest corners of Elesin's heart, and he tries to accompany him wherever possible. Okay, so now we have the next section 4, in which we are going to discuss the themes of the play. Okay, the first theme is the theme of the life cycle. The Yorubans believe that life is a continuum and the dead, even after the death, they are not forgotten, and they see that the death serve as a connection between the living and the dead, and that is why they are honored and they are cherished as their guides and mentors and companions, since they believe that even after their death, they are available to help them, to guide them. And in their culture, the not yet born or unborn people are also cherished because they are going to come in this world, and they may be, in fact, the ancestors. They believe that the souls of their dead ancestors uh, uh, would be present in the unborn, and they may carry their souls. So they believe that ancestors come back to the life in the form of the new babies, and they believe that highly charged moments in their lives are the moments of transition that reflects their change from one type of existence to the next one, from their passage into the physical world during birth and their passage to the death. So in this play we see that Elison's responsibility as a king horseman is to enact this theme of continuum. Since the king is dead, so he has to enact this transition from life into death in a ritual manner, and if he does that, he is going to remind the entire community through his death that life is a continuum. Okay, the next theme that we have is the theme of culture clash, and in the play Death and the King's Horseman, we see two cultures, Yoruba and British, and since they are occupying the same geographic space, even then their emotional and spiritual worlds are apart. We don't see them helping one another. We don't see them merging into each other, etc. But they want to be dominant. Both they want to represent themselves. Okay, and for example, we have instances that sounds of the tango of orchestral music versus the sounds of African drumming. We see that in the ballroom when the party is going on, both the Africans are busy in the drumming sounds, but the in the ballroom the party is going on and orchestra is being played, etc. Then we see that the fancy dress ball and the ritual suicide, they are carried out the same day, and both the communities even living together for a short while, even they don't even a long time, they don't merge into each other, they remain apart, and therefore this clash of culture is actually the force that is moving the universe of its course. The next theme is the theme of duty and responsibility, and since the story of the not I bird, in the very first act of the play, the theme of duty and responsibility has been highlighted, and tells us that the focus of the play is what happens to the universe when duty goes off or duty goes unfulfilled. If people like Elesin do not carry out their duty with responsibility, then everything can get capsized. There can be disillusionment, there can be misery, there can be difficulties, there can be sorrow, there can be sadness. Life wouldn't be on the same track if people like Alison don't do their duties as their responsibilities first. Since he tells that he had always been loyal to the king and he accepts that it is his responsibility, that he is going to die, but he is distracted by the physical world, the beauty of the physical world in the form of a woman, and his distraction proves his downfall, since it was in that time of his marriage that everything happened, and that happened to just add more to his misery, and we see that he fails and the cost of his failure is very high. So now we have here section 5, in which we'll be looking at the style. So in style, first thing we are going to discuss is setting. We know that the play takes place in the Nigerian town of oil in approximately around about 1943 or 44, and the market is the center of the community, and because it is a place that serves to socialize the people so that they can trade with each other and they can celebrate certain rituals and perform them, and it is there. We see that it is in the market that Elesin comes in the very first act of the play. Since he's coming there, he will be able to meet all his friends, all the society there. And we also see the Western style of homes of offices are built quite far from the village, but there are still some close connections since that are not too much far, and they can hear the sounds of ceremonial drumming that the Africans play. And we see that both the communities, they hold their special events on the very same day, but they do not mingle together. And we also see that no whites are present at this ceremony marking Elesin's passage. Only the blacks at the fancy dress ball are the servants. So we can see here the difference between the Westerners and the native people. Here Westerners don't go to the death of the Elesin, but we see the Africans are present in the party of the Westerners and they are serving there as servants. Then in style we have the tragic pattern, and we see that the play Death and the King's Horseman has a tragic pattern, and tragedies had been written since long, and Greeks also wrote tragedies, and the purpose of tragedies, we know it's arousal of pity and fear, so that the people who are the spectators who are, of the tragedy, they are purified psychologically of these emotions of pity and fear. And since tragedy deals with the downfall of an important character, and it represents the dignity of humans and their greatest strengths and weaknesses, it presents those scenes in a series of events and choices, and they result in a great destruction. And we know that structure of a tragedy is divided into several distinct parts. There is an introduction, and in introduction all the major things, characters, setting and situation are established, and then there is the complication or the rising action or the denominator in which the opposing force is introduced, and we see the climax of the turning point, and then with the resolution, or we call it the falling action. And after that falling action comes the resolution of the play, that is, and we see the catastrophe or the unhappy conclusion of the tragedy. And we see that the play Death and the King's Horseman has been established on this tragic pattern. Okay, and other important element that the writer Wole Soyinka uses in his play is the element of foreshadowing. So foreshadowing is basically the introduction of some clues in the very beginning of the play, so that the reader comes to know what is going to happen in the play. For example, this foreshadowing we find in several acts of the play. For example, in Act 1, we have the story of the HIbah, in which we see that that tells us that somehow Elesin wouldn't be able to carry out his duties and he won't be committing suicide. Okay, and then there is the comment of the Elesin on the attractiveness of the women in the market, and on that remark the prayer singer says the hands of women also weaken the unwary. So weaken the unwary here means that he is going to be weak when he has to commit his ritual death. So these sorts of clues create an image in the mind of the audience that there is some sort of possibility of danger or something unusual can happen. So in another incident in the play, when Elesin promises that he will be faithful to commit suicide so that he can join his forebears. The singer replies that in their time the world was never tilted from its grove, it shall not be yours. Again, he is here alluding to the possibility of some calamity or something unwanted that may happen. And this foreshadowing basically helps to prepare the audience for what can happen, and it can prolong and intensify the mystery and suspense of the writers or the people who are going to watch it, means the spectators, and they wait with curiosity to see what Elesin will confront and what will happen when he turns away from his duty. Okay, the next important element that the writer weaves in his style in the play to make his own style is the theme of ritual. And we know that this play is firmly set in Yoruban land, and there are certain Yoruban beliefs there. And since we know that Nigeria and the rest of the world move forward, the world becomes more homogeneous and Western. The ancient beliefs and customs are lost. So to preserve these beliefs and customs, the writer here uses the element of ritual so that the people, the next generations who are going to read it or who are going to learn something from it might come to know about their ancient beliefs and customs, which might not be in practice, since a lot of things are going to be lost and the world is being modernized. So Soyinka suggests in the very beginning of the play that this play is about mourning the loss of a tradition. Okay, and when we see that in the very end of the play, both Elesin and Olune both are dead, so we can see that the tradition of king's horsemen cannot continue, like the tradition that when if the ritual, the suicide must be carried out. So we see if the king's chief horseman and also his son has died, so who is going to carry out it next? No one. It depends on the job of the chief horseman being passed on from father to son, and we see that both of them are dead. So it means that there is the loss of this tradition, there is chaos, no one is going to carry on this tradition next. And with Elesin's failure, it means not only a person has died, but it means there is also a loss of very important ritual that meant a lot to the Africans. Now in the next section, section 6, we are going to discuss the historical context, and in this we are going to discuss the country of Nigeria in turmoil. So we come to know that when Soyinka wrote Death and King's Horseman in 1974, he was living in exile from Nigeria, and he was lecturing at Churchill College of Cambridge University in England. And the earlier years had been very, very difficult for Nigeria and for Soyinka also. And since we know that in 1967, southeastern area of Nigeria declared itself independent Republic of Biafra, and the civil war erupted. And why was there a civil war? There were several causes, and among them some very important were that the secessionists were mostly from the HIbah tribe, and they believed that Nigerian government favor Hausa tribe. So we know that there were a lot of tribes in Africa, and all the tribes were, most of the tribes were against one another for several different reasons. There were and then we come to know that there were some people in the southeast and they were Christians, and in the north there were some Muslims, and oil was produced in the region of the Muslims. So there were some tribal wars, there were some tribal conflicts, and there was disagreement about how the revenues of the overall country should be distributed among all the major tribes, etc. So there was a civil war, and after the civil war we come to know that the country, that the land of Biafra had been wiped out completely. So we come to know that when Soyinka believed that the policies of the government were unjust, he wrote about them. He tried to write letters, and he was then arrested in 1967 for these charges, and he was held in confinement in prisons. While he was in prison, the war continued, and the Biafrans, they were pushed to a smaller area, and after he was released from prison in 1969, he came out that the state of Biafra had been wiped out completely, and this was actually the first African war between the black Africans, and it left a lot of people homeless and starving. And the writer Wole Soyinka could see many of the Nigerians. They were hungry, they were dying. The economy of the country was in ruins, and the country was divided among the corrupt rulers of the military and politicians and other European oil companies, and but the life of an average Nigerian was very much miserable, since he was unemployed and he was underfed. And after seeing this miserable plight of the Nigerians, Soyinka directed his attention towards the University of Ibadan's theatre arts department for a short time, and then he lived outside Nigeria for 5 years. He traveled through Europe and the United States, and where he wrote and taught and directed several plays. And he spent 2 years during Ghana, and here he got his political acumen and insight. He and wherever now he found any sort of colonization or corruption or weakness, he always tried to expose it in any way he could. So in the play The Death and the King's Horseman also tells about his vision, and through his play he very clearly communicates the role of duty and responsibility in a person's life. And if people like Elesin do not don't do their duty, and they fall short of their responsibility, then they also make the life of other people miserable. So this was all regarding the history of Nigeria. Let's move towards the next and the last section of our today's discussion, section 7. In this section we have several important questions. Let us have a look at it. We have 4 questions, and these questions are very important from the examination point of view. I hope you understood today's lecture very well. Thank you very much.